For centuries, the land now known as Israel has been home to both Palestinians and Jews. But for more than 50 years, this small nation has also given rise to bloody wars, refugees, and terrorism. Two peoples, both with a claim to this land, both turning to violence when diplomacy fails. What are the roots of this conflict, and can there be peace in this divided land? Israel, Palestine. This is the birthplace of Christianity, Judaism, and also sacred to Muslims. Its holy sites are places of pilgrimage for millions. The Jews trace their history here to the time of the Bible, when God promised the land to Abraham. But the Palestinians are also descended from the ancient biblical peoples and from the Arab conquerors of the 7th century. But for the Jews, expelled from this land over the centuries by invaders, its spiritual legacy is one they've never relinquished. Jews are persecuted for centuries in Europe. The pogroms, or massacres, of the late 19th century lead many to believe they will only be safe in their own state. This belief becomes a political movement called Zionism. Then, the biggest war the world has ever seen, the First World War in 1914, means that the Jews are to come closer to a homeland. The British want allies in the Middle East. The Arabs are fighting the Turkish Ottomans for independence, and the British back them. British ally Russia is losing the will to continue, and believing the Jews could influence the Russians, the British back Jewish claims for a homeland. After the war, the Germans are defeated. The Middle East is divided between the British and the French. Palestine is now governed by Britain. Their fateful decision in 1919 to adopt the Jewish claim for a homeland as official policy is to affect the Holy Land from that moment on.
The British mandate was designed specifically to bring about the creation of a national home for the Jews, which ultimately meant a state, with no similar commitment to self-government or independence or statehood for the indigenous inhabitants, in other words, the Palestinian Arabs.
Encouraged by the attitude of the British, 35,000 Jews emigrate to Palestine over the next 4 years. Palestinian unease about the influx leads to riots against the Jews and the British, culminating in the 3-year Arab Revolt of 1936. The Palestinians are crushed by the British and their leadership destroyed. The Jews continue to arrive, although the British start limiting numbers. The end of the Second World War makes the question of a recognized homeland a priority. 6 million Jews are exterminated in the Nazi death camps during the Holocaust, and the survivors are determined that it will never happen again. With no safe haven in Europe, because countries turn them away, they look to the land of Palestine, a land the Jewish Bible, the Torah, calls Israel. But the Palestinian Arabs don't want any more Jews immigrating, and to keep the peace, the British limit the influx, turning boatloads away. The UN decide that Palestine should be divided into separate Jewish and Arab states. The Palestinian Arabs are allocated sections to the northwest, in the center, a strip by the sea, and land on the Egyptian border. The Zionists are given what remains, while Jerusalem is to be controlled by the UN. But the Palestinians reject the plan. But as Israelis celebrate, they're plunged into war. They have to defend themselves against 5 Arab nations, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon, who launch an attack. They're opposed to the creation of Israel and want to secure land for Arabs. To the world's astonishment, Israel wins its war of independence, and as victor claims some of the territory designated to Palestine. But neighboring Jordan seizes the West Bank, and more land is lost to Egypt, which claims the Gaza Strip. Jerusalem is split in 2, Israel controlling the west of the city and Jordan the east. In 1956, a crisis erupts over the Suez Canal, a vital shortcut for ships traveling to Europe from the rest of the world. Britain and France are major shareholders, and when Egypt nationalizes the canal, they promise to give more aid to Israel if she backs them. So Israel goes to war against Egypt. A ceasefire is agreed, but there would be no lasting peace between Arab and Jew, while Palestinians remain stateless. For the next 20 years, Arab countries oppose the State of Israel. Then comes the Six-Day War.
6 Days War was a defining moment in the history of Israel. You know, since the War of Independence, 19 years, there was no major challenge to the existence of Israel. Here it comes once again.
Israel turns to the United States for support.
When the moment of truce came, the American commitment evaporated. And we realized once again that we have to rely only on ourselves. It was not easy. There was a lot of hesitation and anxiety in the political leadership.
Britain and France also refuse help. And again, Israel fights alone. But in 12 hours, they completely destroy the Egyptian, Jordanian, and Syrian air forces, and within 6 days, wipe out their armies. Israel now has defense in depth. She creates buffer zones between herself and her enemies. She takes the West Bank from Jordan, the Gaza Strip and the Sinai from Egypt, and the Golan Heights from Syria, and quadruples in size. With shifting borders, 1 million more Palestinians come under Israeli military rule. Trying to bring about peace, the UN passes a resolution, which is to become the basis of all future negotiations. Resolution 242 states that land now occupied by Israel will be exchanged for peace if the Arabs recognize Israel's existence. But Israel won't withdraw, and most Arab nations refuse to recognize the Jewish state.
The State of Israel is located in the Middle East along the Mediterranean Sea. It's bordered by Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. Although it's smaller than the state of New Jersey, Israel is home to over 6 million people. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. It is also the spiritual home of 3 of the world's major religions: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Jerusalem holds enormous importance for all 3 groups, and all 3 have claimed the city as their own. Jerusalem's old city is made up of a diverse collection of people and architecture. There are Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and Armenian Orthodox sections all crammed into a single square mile. But outside the old city, Jerusalem's inhabitants live in a modern city with high-rise buildings, supermarkets, businesses, and schools. Over the past 3,000 years, Jerusalem has been conquered, destroyed, and rebuilt many times. Jerusalem got its start some 6,000 years ago when settlers proclaimed that Mount Moriah would connect them to their God. Villages and then a city slowly grew up around the mountain. In about 1000 BC, King David conquered the city and made it the capital for the tribes of Israel. He also brought the belief in a new God, Yahweh. King Solomon built a great temple on the holy mountain. 3,000 years later, the mountain is hidden under a platform made of stone, the Temple Mount. Although the temple was destroyed long ago, Jews from all over the world still gather at the remnants of the wall that supported it, the Western Wall. Also called the Wailing Wall, it's said that God's presence is particularly strong here. Countless messages and prayers to God are packed between the stones of the wall. For Baruch Kaplan, these stones lie at the center of his faith.
For me personally, I can touch my relationship with God to the extent that I can touch these stones, because these stones have been standing here, listening to the prayers of mankind for thousands of years.
Directly above the western wall stands a magnificent Islamic shrine. The Dome of the Rock was completed in AD 691, when the Muslims ruled Jerusalem. The dome is built over the top of Mount Moriah. Islam proclaims that this was the spot where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven to speak with Allah and the 10 great prophets. Shireen al-Raja is a Muslim born in Jerusalem and has been coming to the Dome of the Rock since she was young.
I like the feeling that everybody's coming here, like all the Muslims from all over. We have the same feeling, we share the same thing. I mean, everybody's praying, everybody's thinking, everybody's charging himself, everybody's cheering up. If you go around, you'll find a lot of people crying.
About 400 yards away is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This site is important to Christians. The church was built in 1149, and some say it is the location of Jesus' tomb. Inside the church lies the holy rock of Golgotha. Christians believe this rock is from the hill where Jesus was crucified. Bishop Nicephorus is a Greek Orthodox clergyman who has served in Jerusalem for 30 years.
By seeing these places, touching them, we strengthen our faith. With our imagination, we can feel the emotions and the feelings of the people that came before us.
With all these competing religious, cultural, and historic claims to the city, it's easy to see why so many people feel so strongly about Jerusalem, why they've been fighting for it over the centuries, and why they're still willing to fight for it today.